Hello, everybody. Dr. Koh here today. We have a special guest who's basically the editor of a great book that I think all of us should read. Lessons Learned, Stories from Women Physician Leaders. This is her third iteration. I'm going to be introducing you to a doctor who has a very long background in management and leadership. Her name is Dr. Deborah Shlian, and she is a board certified family practitioner and an MBA who has an MBA with 20 years of clinical and management experience. She had a national consulting and executive search firm that was enormously successful, and she's been a part of AAPL, which, if you don't know, is American Association for Physician Leadership, where she served as head of the forum on women in medicine and management. She's just really been a great advocate for women in leadership and in medicine. So I want to bring her on board without further ado. Dr. Shlian, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, so what is the impetus? I wanted to show everyone, and I couldn't find the picture of your first book in 1995, but I found this biography. I saw it in Harvard. I can borrow this book from 1995. You had this first iteration of Women in Medicine and Management, and that was in 1995. Then you had the 2012 version of Lessons Learned, Stories from Women in Medical Management, and now 2022. The third iteration, and you are the main editor. You've brought these women together on Lessons Learned, Stories from Women Physician Leaders. Tell us a little bit about why the three different editions.
Okay, so in 1995, I did the first edition, and I was an early member of what was then the American College of Physician Executives, which is now the American Association for Physician Leadership. There were very few women in the organization, and that was upsetting to me, obviously. And they asked me if I would do a monograph of where women were. It was called Women in Medical Management, a Mentoring Guide. Now, we were only about 19% of practicing physicians at that time in 1995. That was up from something like 8% in 1970-something. So as you can imagine, it was very difficult to find very many women who were in low-level or mid-level management positions, and almost none in senior level. But I did find, and the other thing was that I do write fiction in between my nonfiction. So I like
That's right. I saw that. Amazing.
Right. I like medical thrillers. I like the narrative form because I think it's a powerful way to engage people. People tend to remember stories more than they remember data. So even though I do an overview for all these books about where we are statistically, the stories were the most important thing. So I found 17 representative women in that 1995 version, and I asked them to tell their personal stories. Rather than my interviewing them, I wanted them to tell it in their words, how they decided to become doctors, how they managed to transition into some kind of administrative roles, and what were the obstacles and challenges they faced. And what was interesting from that first iteration was that few of them had really moved into leadership, in a planned way. Most of them did not have role models or mentors to help guide their careers. And all of them felt there was a thick glass ceiling that was keeping them from moving ahead. So when in 2012, the college asked me again, would I update this book? Because, surely we're doing much better now. It's 2012, we're 30% of, that's the Lessons Learned, Stories from Women in Medical Management.
2012.
Now at that time we were 30% of practicing physicians in the United States, and so everybody expected the statistics to be much better. But as it turns out, we were only 16% of leadership roles across the country. And what was interesting was that, and that was true for any area of healthcare. But what was also interesting is that Deborah Spar, who was the president of Barnard College, was writing about the fact that women were across any area of Fortune 500 corporate, organizations, whether it was academia, government, aerospace, Hollywood, or politics. We were no more than 16% of leadership roles in those areas. I'm not talking about women physicians now. And so she called that a 16% ghetto. So for that book, I decided to use the same format. I went back to the original women and I asked if they would continue to tell their stories. And 10 of them said they would. And by the way, I was included in the book because at the time in 1995, I had already started my own business. So I was kind of unique then. And so So this is why I'm still in the book. But anyway, I had 24 women in that book. And they, at that point, many of them had really moved ahead, and they were quite successful in a lot of different areas of medical management, including corporate medical directors, managed care executives, managers within government, pharmaceutical industry, academic leaders, hospital executives, consultants, entrepreneurs, and even some coaches. And so that book was quite successful. And then suddenly during COVID, I was asked if I would do yet another update, because people were asking, where are these women now? Have they,
Incredible. Yep.
are we doing better? And have we made it yet? And
Yep.
so basically, this is
So
the
you bring this book again.
iteration.
It's the third
Right.
one.
So I went back to the original 24 women. 23 of them said they would love to continue telling their stories, because many of them really felt the need to be mentors at this point. And that was what was so great about the women that I chose. And then I added an additional group. So we have 32 women in this book, actually 33 if you include Teresa Rohr, her last name, Graber rather. She'll forgive me. I call her Teresa. She's the current president of the American Medical Women's Association. She wrote a lovely foreword for the book. But anyway, these 32 women have all, as I said, been much more successful. Many of them have moved into quite senior positions, like Patricia Gabbo, who became the CEO of Denver Hospital, and Lane Batchelor, who is the CEO of Martin Luther King Hospital. So they had moved ahead. And then I also added 2 young women who were just finishing. One was just finishing medical school, and she's now a resident at University of Michigan, and a second-year resident who is now chief resident in Tampa. Both of them had taken leadership courses at the FIU Medical School. And so I wanted some of these younger women to talk about how they actually have some aspirations to be leaders early on in their careers, which is quite different from people like myself, who really started out not even thinking about that. So this,
right.
yeah.
So what have you seen? What's the trend that you've seen from each iteration of these books? Have you seen an improvement in women's roles in leadership in medicine?
Certainly seen an improvement. What I have seen is, certainly as women get into management, they love the role. That's always been the idea that maybe women don't want to be leaders. There's also this sense of being able to have a wider role. I mean, everybody starts out as a clinician. I think it's very important for physician executives to start out as clinicians, there are now something like 60 MD, MBA programs, but to simply graduate from those programs and think you're going to be head of an organization, I happen to think is a mistake. And that was pretty much what everybody agreed in this book, that you should be a clinician first, because after all, you don't want to forget the patient. But as a physician who's been a clinician, you have a unique perspective. And then you can pick up the skills that you may need depending on what kind of organization that you end up being a leader in. So,
right. So what do you see as some of the opportunities for women going forward in your 4th book that's going to come probably in the next one? And then some of the challenges that we're facing?
All right. Well, first of all, the challenges are different in different areas. In academia, we're moving backwards. It turns out that women are being penalized. The women who are taking time out in mid-careers to have children are suddenly maybe not publishing as much, and that seems to be the coin of the realm in terms of research publications. So that, of course, that has to change. But they are not as many women on editorial boards sometimes that make the decisions about what papers are going to be published. And there's still an old an old boys club in terms of sort of the idea of who is a good leader, that it's a male stereotype, which has to change. Then I think, in terms of there's a confidence gap that women seem to have, no matter how accomplished they are. They're never quite sure that they're good enough. And it's amazing to me that when I've done recruiting and I've sent a job description to a woman who I've already vetted and I know she's right for a position, I count the seconds until she tells me, I don't have this skill or that skill. But if I send the same job description to a male candidate who maybe a little bit less qualified, he has no problems saying that he's perfect for the role. So that's something. And then, there are institutional issues, because there is not, as I say, the family leave in some cases, or daycare for more and more women who want to combine personal and professional life. They don't want to give up their careers. My group was told not to have children, But this group, and I'm happy to say that, women want to have it all. It's just a question of trying to balance it. So that was something that this iteration, I think we discussed a little bit more, how they were able to really make the balance, and what kinds of things, what were the obstacles that they faced.
Right. So who did you write this book for specifically? You probably had a target audience. Is it early, mid-career? Is it any generation?
I
Why,
was,
who is it for?
I'd say yes, because I think it's a wider audience than I originally thought. I thought this would be for young women who are in medicine and want to perhaps transition into management. But I'm now hearing from medical students, from people who are interested in medicine, and even for people who are not physicians, who are seeing there's a sort of universality in some of the lessons that people have learned about, how the need to negotiate, how to be a risk taker, those kinds of things that are really true for any kind of administrative role. So
Yeah. So thank you so much for that. Again, this is the book that we're talking about right now, Lessons Learned Stories from Women Physician Leaders. Tell us, what are the big learning points that you've taken? I mean, this is almost like doing a research project,
right.
interviewing all these people, and then you come together in your final chapter with some big learning points. I know there's 12 big learning points, but what would you say are the biggest, the 4 to 5 biggest points that you want to get across to the audience?
Well, again, as I said, for a physician executive, I think being a clinician first. I really do want people who are considering being leaders in medicine as physicians to get into the front lines first, see what it's like to be a clinician, and then take on those administrative roles, because that gives you a unique perspective that non-physicians obviously are not going to have. Then it's reassessing your goals as you go, because that's very important. And for everybody, careers are a personal thing. So, how you measure success is different depending on what your values are and where you want to be. So you should reassess those goals maybe every, say, 5 years. There should be a certain time when you do that. You have to be a lifelong learner, because medicine is changing, as we know. It seems like every day it's changing, but certainly keeping up is very, very important. Networking. I didn't learn the term network until I went to business school. I wish I had learned it earlier, but that made a big difference in terms of my career. Learning to negotiate, again, something that women are not as good at as men, unfortunately. We just, we're not used to asking for ourselves. We're maybe good for negotiating for other people, but not for our own self. I think the most important is also finding a mentor and a role model. And a good mentor is somebody who really is willing to tell you what you don't want to hear sometimes. So
Right.
That's important.
Yes.
And I would say one of the final things would be to make time for yourself. It's very important to make time for family, for vacations, for time to relax, and learning how to say no, which is a big problem for most of the women that I interviewed, that I have in the book. That they really try to do it all, and you just can't, and that's okay.
Right. I mean, I think people come to me sometimes and say, what's the first step? There seems like there's so much that I need to know, and I don't even know where to start. I mean, I think finding a mentor, how much trouble have women, in your experience, finding another mentor, and do they necessarily need to find a woman mentor?
I don't think you need to find a woman mentor, but it's always nice to at least know some women who you can, you see as role models, I would say, but I think a mentor is more somebody that will help you, kind of guide you a little bit in your career and talk to you and give you some advice along the way. So no, I don't think it has to be a woman. How difficult it is? Well, I think it depends on, again, what organization you're in. More and more medical schools are starting to help provide mentorship. So that's really good. And some organizations are doing that, but we need to do it more. And certainly the American Medical Women's Association and the AAPL are doing the same. So so I think getting involved in some of these organizations is very helpful.
So good. And thank you so much for your contribution. I'm amazed and how you accomplished writing so many books and continue to write. And you just told me before we got on that you're writing another book. So.
Well, what happened was some of the non-physicians who read the book said, why aren't you doing anything about women in STEM? Because as you can imagine, we don't have enough young women who are going into math and some of the more technical side of STEM fields like engineering and so on. So I've got a group of so far 26 women who are unbelievable leaders, and they're really excited about doing this similar project.
Wow, thank you so much. So Deborah, can you tell us how someone can get in touch with you, want to find more information? Also, people in your book, you mentioned how people can reach out to
Yeah.
them as mentors.
So my email is schlienbooks@gmail.com. That's the best email to get in touch with me. And I have asked all of the women in the book to be willing to be mentors. They want to be mentors. So if anybody finds someone in the book that they feel that they would like to get in contact with, contact me first, and then I will connect you.
Gosh, geez, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining. This is Dr. Koh, CEO and founder of Lead Physician Leadership Program. If you have a topic on physician leadership, please reach out to me at info@drlckoh.com. I'd love to hear from you. And if you want to hear more of these videos that are very valuable for all of us physicians to be more involved in leadership and help with healthcare, go to YouTube, Lead Physician, and subscribe and listen to those other videos. I'm so grateful to all the contributors to this podcast. Any last words of wisdom for us, Dr. Shlian?
I would say read the book. It is because the stories are just very inspiring. I found them really terrific to read. I found all the ladies in this book really, awe-inspiring and very, and people that I just think are terrific.
Yeah, I did an interview. I don't know if you know, with Dr. Asha
Sure.
Padmanabhan. That was very interesting, and she's amazing. So you've recruited some amazing people. So thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and stay tuned till next Sunday. Thank you for liking and sharing with everybody.